The Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959 is usually told as a story about exposure. Non-experienced hikers, a remote mountain slope in the northern Ural region, severe weather, fatal decisions. That is the version preserved in official summaries. But this version begins with something smaller, a letter that was never entered into record. Sergei Mikhailov was not one of the 9 hikers. He was part of a volunteer search team sent weeks later, when it became clear the group was not returning. By then, the mountain had changed. Fresh snowfall had softened edges. Wind had reshaped the surface into smooth, deceptive curves. When Sergei first saw the tent, he expected ruin. Instead, he saw control. The canvas had been cut from the inside, not torn apart wildly, but opened in deliberate slashes. Clean enough to suggest urgency, yet steady enough to suggest awareness. Experienced hikers understand cold. They respect it. They do not abandon shelter without reason. Inside, the layout felt strangely intact. Sleeping bags were still arranged. Boots lined near the entrance. Food supplies undisturbed. A flashlight was reportedly found resting on top of the tent. Functional when recovered. It did not look like chaos. It looked interrupted. Sergei crawled further in while the rest of the team surveyed the perimeter. Snow filtered through the opening, dusting the interior in thin layers. The air felt still despite the wind outside. Near the rear corner, beneath a folded jacket stiff with frost, he found a notebook. Most expedition journals are predictable. Weather notes, altitude complaints, inside jokes to ease tension. The early pages matched that pattern. Casual handwriting, humor, ordinary discomfort. But the final page shifted. The pressure of the pen deepened. The lines tightened. At first we thought it was the wind. Sergei paused. He turned back a page, then forward again. Same writer, different tone. We heard it again after midnight. Not footsteps, not exactly. Something circling, keeping distance. Outside, someone from the search team called out measurements. The sound faded against the slope. Sergei kept reading. Zina says I'm imagining it. Yuri laughed, but Igor hasn't spoken for 10 minutes. He hears it too. The writing leaned downward near the edge of the paper. Whatever it is, it stops when we listen. Stops when we listen. That detail unsettled him more than the mention of circling. Wind does not respond to attention. Snow does not pause out of awareness. He shifted his weight slightly, feeling the cold press through his gloves. If this entry was written shortly before they cut their way out, then what bridged the gap between listening and fleeing? The official investigation would later propose environmental stress, wind-generated infrasound, disorientation caused by extreme weather. These explanations remain widely accepted, but the tone of the final page did not suggest confusion. It suggested observation. He read the final lines. It's closer now, not moving like an animal. Too steady, too deliberate, being thinned slightly. We should not have come here. That sentence carried weight, not panic, regret. Then the final line. Half written, it's there beyond the tree leaf. Watching the sentence ended without flourish. No jagged tear through the page. No smear of ink. Just a clean, unfinished thought. Sergei lowered the notebook slowly. If something had been beyond the tree line, why were there no additional tracks recorded near the site? Why were most of the hikers later found moving downhill in a measured line, rather than scattering in different directions? Why were some discovered as though attempting to return toward the tent? Why leave boots behind? Why mark the tent with a working flashlight? The mountain offered no reply. Snow shifted in soft currents along the surface. The tree line stood still. No broken branches. No disturbed drifts. Nothing visible. Nothing easily named. Yet the final entry did not read like hysteria. It did not read like a mind unraveling under cold stress. It read like someone attempting to remain rational while describing something they could not categorize. Something patient, something that did not rush, something that allowed them to decide. Sergei closed the notebook and crawled back out into the wind. The horizon stretched blank and indifferent in every direction. Officially, the case would settle into environmental conclusions. Unofficially, one unfinished sentence would remain suspended in the cold. It's there beyond the tree line, watching them, what had been beyond the trees. And more importantly, why did it never leave footprints? Sergei did not show the unfinished letter to the rest of the search team. Not immediately. He folded it with careful precision and slipped it into the inner pocket of his coat. The paper was stiff with cold, fragile at the edges, yet it felt heavier than any official report he would later sign. By the time the first bodies were located downslope, the explanation had already begun forming in quiet conversations. Exposure, disorientation, severe weather event, possibly an avalanche threat that forced a rapid evacuation. Tragedy prefers simple language. But Sergei could not move past the final unfinished line. It's standing beyond the tree line. Watching the what? The tent? The hikers? Each other? The first two bodies were found near a cedar tree, almost a mile from the campsite. Barefoot, lightly clothed, a small fire pit nearby showed they had tried to generate warmth. They had not run blindly. They had attempted to survive. The footprints preserved in the snow suggested the group left the tent together. Their stride patterns were aligned, measured, not the erratic scatter of panic. 9 people stepped into the freezing dark as one. So what forces a unified decision like that? Later, more bodies were discovered in a ravine. Some showed severe internal trauma, broken ribs, skull fractures, injuries investigators would compare to high-impact force. Yet the external damage did not fully mirror a violent assault. Falls were suggested, possible, reasonable, but standing there in the snow, reason felt distant. Sergei returned to the tree line mentioned in the letter. The forest stood motionless against the white horizon. Snow had settled thick between the trunks. Wind had erased most detail, smoothing the surface into deceptive calm. He stepped carefully, then stopped. Between 2 trees lay a shallow depression in the snow. Not a defined footprint, not clear enough to measure. Just different, subtly compressed, placed where the wind had left the rest untouched. From that position, the tent site was clearly visible, a direct line of sight. Sergei felt something shift inside him. Not fear exactly, but recognition. He unfolded the letter once more, not moving like an animal. Too steady, too deliberate. Deliberate. Animals hesitate. They shift weight unpredictably. Délibérate implique intention. An intention implies awareness. He scanned the forest. Nothing moved. No branchi stirred. No sound broke the stillness. Yet the silence did not feel empty. It felt attentive. He imagined the final hours inside the tent. Wind pressing against fabric. A sound circling at measured intervals. Stopping when they listened. Not charging. Not retreating. Waiting. One of them opens the flap. Sees something beyond the tree line. Not rushing forward. Not hiding. Just there. Watching. Inside that thin canvas shelter, uncertainty spreads faster than cold. One person senses it. Another falls quiet. The air tightens. If all 9 believe something was observing them, truly observing them, then leaving together might have felt like control. Step outside. Regain visibility. Remove the barrier. But once outside, the mountain offers no protection. And whatever had been beyond the trees may not have remained there. The descent begins in order. Later, something fractures it. Separation, injury, silence. Sergei folded the letter and returned it to his coat. He did not include it in official documentation. There was no measurable evidence attached to it. No confirmed secondary tracks. No vede faudi intrude. Only a description. Only a feeling. Years later, public statements would summarize the event as natural forces combined with unknown, compelling elements. Unknown, a word large enough to hold anything. The mountains remain unchanged. Snow still smooths the slope each winter. Wind still moves through the Urals with low, rhythmic patterns. Sometimes it sounds like distance shifting. Sometimes it sounds like something circling, stopping when you listen. If you ever stand in a place where the silence feels structured instead of empty, ask yourself one question. Are you certain nothing is watching? Subscribe to the Lost Letters. Because some mysteries are not about what attacked. They're about what waited. And the next one might be closer than you think.